My mother has never been a dramatic person. I want to say that first because everything I'm about to tell you is her story as much as mine, and she is the most grounded, practical woman I know. She is not someone who sees danger where there is none. She is not someone who panics. I was 6 years old. I'm telling you this as an adult, reconstructed from my own memory and from years of conversations with my mother about what happened. Some of what I remember is mine. Some of it is hers. All of it is real. We were living in a ground floor apartment at the time. My parents had recently separated, and it was just the two of us, my mother and me. Small place, 2 bedrooms at the end of a hallway, across from each other. My mother was careful. She locked the deadbolt every night, and she put the chain on, and she checked the windows, and she did all of this methodically, the way a woman alone learns to do things when she is responsible for keeping something small and irreplaceable safe. I don't remember what woke her. She said later it wasn't a noise exactly. It was more like a change in the quality of the air, like something had shifted in the apartment and her body knew before her mind did. She sat up in bed and listened, and then she heard breathing in the hallway. She told me she thought she was still dreaming. Then she heard it again. She crossed to her bedroom door and opened it, and there was a man standing in the hallway, not moving, just standing there in the dark between our 2 doors. What she did next was the thing she has always said she cannot explain. She didn't scream. She stepped back into her room, picked me up off her bed where I had fallen asleep beside her, walked to the window, opened it, dropped me gently to the grass below, and followed me out. Then she screamed. The neighbors called the police. The police came and found no one inside. The front door was unlocked, which they used to explain how the man had left. My mother swore she had bolted it. She had no explanation for how he got in. Here is the part that I think about most. About a week after it happened, my mother was cleaning the apartment. She is always cleaned when she is anxious. And she opened the door to the water heater closet in the kitchen. She'd never had reason to go in there before. It was a narrow closet, barely big enough for a person to stand upright. Inside, pushed toward the back, was a notebook and a pair of gloves and several gum wrappers. She called the police again. They looked at the notebook. There were names in it. Not just her name, other names, addresses, small drawings. The police couldn't tell her how long it had been there. They said they believed the man had entered the apartment on a previous occasion and hidden in the closet, had been inside before and had been waiting. They moved us to a new apartment within 2 weeks. She never fully explained to me what was in that notebook until I was much older. When she finally told me, I understood for the first time why she had never once after that night allowed our front door to go unlocked for any reason, not even while we were inside, not even in the middle of the day. I have my own apartment now. I have my own routines, and I have inherited one habit from my mother without ever consciously deciding to do it. Every single night before I go to sleep, I check every closet in my apartment. Not because I believe someone is there, because I know it's possible. This happened during a period in my life when I was running every morning. 6 a.m., same route, same trail along the river, same 45 minutes. It was the kind of habit that keeps you sane when other parts of your life aren't going well. The repetition was the point. Nothing about it felt risky. It was early, it was a public trail, there were always other runners. He appeared on a Thursday. I noticed him because of the way he was standing. He wasn't running, he was just standing near the bench at the halfway point, the one where the trail bends around the big oak and you can see the water. He was dressed like a runner, in a gray jacket and dark pants, but he was completely still in a way that runners aren't when they stop. Runners stretch, look at their phones, breathe. He was just standing there, facing the trail, and when I passed him, he watched me go by without blinking. I told myself it was nothing. Friday morning, same bench, same jacket, same stillness. This time I looked at him as I passed, and he nodded at me. A slow nod, deliberate. the kind of acknowledgement that implies familiarity. That bothered me more than it should have. I mentioned it to my coworker later that day, and she said it was probably just a regular park goer who had noticed me the same way I'd noticed him. We see the same faces in the places we go every day. It's pattern recognition. It doesn't mean anything. But I started paying attention. I started varying my pace slightly, sometimes speeding up, sometimes slowing down near the bench. He was never running. He was always there before me and gone after I passed. On Monday morning, the fourth time I'd seen him, he spoke to me. I had slowed down just before the bench because my shoelace was loose, and before I could move away, he said, "Good morning," and then he said my name. Not my full name, a nickname, a shortened version that I go by with people who know me well. I stopped. I looked at him. I said, "Do I know you?" He smiled in this unhurried, comfortable way, like we were resuming a conversation, and he said something like, "We've met before, don't you remember? You come here most mornings. You used to go longer before you changed jobs." I felt the cold move through me. Before you changed jobs. I had changed jobs 7 months earlier. I had never spoken to this man in my life. I was certain of it, the way you're certain of very few things, with the absolute clarity of someone who has just heard something they were never meant to hear. I didn't respond. I started running, harder than I'd been running in months, and I got back to my car and I sat in it with the doors locked for 20 minutes, breathing. I went back through everything I'd posted publicly in the past year. My social media was set to private, but I had a professional profile with my workplace and my general neighborhood. My running photos, which I'd stopped posting months ago, had included tags from that trail. I had mentioned in a comment thread on a friend's post that I was starting a new job that fall. All of it was there, fragmented, scattered, but there. He had assembled me from pieces. I stopped running that trail. I changed my route and I changed my time, and I went through every social media account I had and I stripped them down to almost nothing. I filed a report with the police, who noted it and told me to keep a log of any contact. There wasn't enough for a restraining order. There was nothing formally illegal about what had happened. He had learned my name from public information and said it to me outdoors on a public trail. That was it. That was all. But here's what I want you to understand about that interaction, the thing that has never left me in the years since. He wasn't angry. He wasn't menacing in any obvious way. He was calm, patient. He spoke to me the way you speak to someone you've known for years. And that patience, the patience of a person who has been watching from a distance and felt no urgency about it, was the most frightening thing I have ever experienced. The last time I saw him was 3 months later. I was at a grocery store on the other side of the city, a store I'd started going to precisely because it was nowhere near my apartment or my new route or any place I could imagine him knowing about. He was in a cereal aisle. He didn't speak to me. He just looked at me, the same unhurried, knowing look, and then he turned and walked toward the exit. I stood in that aisle for a long time. I have no idea where he is now. I run trails. I have been running trails since I was 19, and I have been through rain and fog and August heat that turns the air into something you have to chew. I have startled deer. I have slipped on mud. I have taken wrong turns and come out on the other side of the woods a mile from where I meant to be. I am comfortable in outdoor spaces in a way that most people aren't. And I say that not to be impressive, but to give you a sense of who I am when I tell you what happened. Because I know what I saw. It was a Tuesday morning, early fall. The trail I run follows an old fire road through about 4 miles of light forest before it opens onto a meadow section where the grass grows tall on both sides of the path. I had been out for maybe 25 minutes when I saw it. A suitcase, large, hard-sided, dark blue, sitting half hidden in the tall grass about 10 feet off the right side of the trail. It was tilted slightly on its side in a way that made it look like it had been placed there rather than abandoned, set down with intention. I slowed to a walk. I don't know exactly what made me approach it. Curiosity, maybe, or the particular kind of concern that comes from being a person who has encountered enough of the world to know that a large suitcase in the middle of nowhere at 6 in the morning is not a normal thing. I had taken maybe 3 steps toward it when the man came out of the trees. He didn't run. That's important. He walked out of the tree line with a kind of calmness that made my skin go cold immediately. Because panic, you can understand, panic is human, but calmness in that moment was something else entirely. He was wearing boots, work boots, not running shoes, and he moved quickly to place himself between me and the suitcase without ever breaking his easy, deliberate stride. He held up a hand and said something about the bag, something dismissive, casual, that I don't fully remember because my brain had already shifted into a different mode. He said something like, "That's nothing, don't worry about it." I said, "Okay," and I turned around. I didn't run right away because I didn't want him to know I was afraid. That sounds absurd, but it was an instinct, a deep animal understanding that being perceived as prey is its own kind of danger. I walked for about 30 seconds, and then I ran. I ran hard, and I didn't stop until I was back at the parking lot and in my car. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table for a while. Then I called a friend. While I was describing what happened, even as the words were coming out of my mouth, I was trying to minimize it. I was saying things like, "It's probably nothing. He was probably just some guy." My friend listened and then said, very quietly, "You should call someone." 2 days later, I was back on a different trail in the same general area when I encountered a pair of officers working their way through the meadow section. When I asked what they were looking for, one of them said they were investigating a report of a missing person last seen in the area. I stopped walking. I told them about the suitcase. I told them about the man. I gave them as much detail as I could. His clothing, his approximate height, the way he moved, the direction he came from, which edge of the tree line. They took a statement and they took my number. I don't know what they found in that suitcase. I don't know what was at the end of that investigation. I received a follow-up call about 2 weeks later thanking me for the information and telling me the matter was ongoing, and that was the last I heard. But I think about that moment of calmness, that deliberate, practiced calmness. He wasn't surprised to see me. He was prepared for me. He had a response already assembled. Just some stranger, don't worry about it. Which means he had thought about what to say if someone came along. I think about the fact that I almost didn't approach the suitcase. I took 3 steps toward it, and he came out of the trees. If I'd taken 5 steps or 7, or if I had been looking at my watch and not at him when he appeared, the distance between us would have been different. I run different trails now, different times, different starting points. I still run. I am still that person who feels at home in open space and early morning light, but I no longer approach things that don't belong. I want to start by saying that I am not the kind of person who panics. I've lived alone for almost 3 years. I know every corner of my apartment. I know which floorboard creaks near the bathroom. I know the way the kitchen light flickers when the refrigerator kicks on. I know the sound the pipes make at 2 in the morning when the building shifts. I know this place. That's what made it so hard to accept what I found. It started the way most things do, small, unremarkable, the kind of thing that floats in your head for a second and then disappears. I was getting ready for work one morning and I noticed a phone charger plugged into the wall socket across from my bathroom door. It was just sitting there, tucked low, almost flush against the baseboard. Black, standard looking, the kind of thing you'd walk past 100 times without thinking twice. But I didn't own that charger. I stood there for a moment, genuinely trying to convince myself I was wrong. I went through the apartment in my mind. I had 2 chargers. One was on my nightstand, one was in my bag. I checked both places. They were there, both of them, right where I'd left them. So I just unplugged the one I didn't recognize and put it on the counter. My brain gave me an easy out. Maybe a friend left it when they visited last month. I told myself that. I believed it for about 4 hours. Then I got home from work and I picked it up again. It was heavier than it should have been. That's the detail I can't stop thinking about even now. It was just slightly, unmistakably heavier than a normal charger. And there was something about the way the plastic was seamed at the top, a tiny ridge I hadn't noticed in the morning. I turned it over in my hands. I pressed along the sides. And then I saw it. A lens. It was no bigger than the tip of a pen, but it was there, sitting right at the top of the charger, angled out, pointed directly, deliberately at the spot where I stood every morning while I waited for the bathroom to fill with steam, where I got undressed, where I sometimes just stood in the hallway in a towel, on my phone, not thinking about anything. My hands started shaking. That kind of shake you can't control, where your body knows something before your mind fully catches up. I set it down on the counter like it was a living thing. Then I started looking at everything else. I went through my apartment the way you clean it when someone important is visiting, methodically, obsessively, with a kind of terrifying focus. I checked every outlet, every smoke detector, every small device I didn't specifically remember buying. I pulled picture frames off the wall. I looked at the clock on the microwave for too long. I found nothing else, but finding one was enough. Here's the thing about living alone that nobody tells you. When you find out your space has been violated, you don't just lose your sense of safety, you lose your memory. Because suddenly, every private moment you've had in that apartment is contaminated. Every time I cried after a difficult phone call, every time I stood in the kitchen at midnight eating cereal in my underwear, every argument I had in the bathroom mirror, all of it potentially watched, potentially recorded, by someone who knew exactly where to put that thing to see the most of me. I called the police. They came and they took the device, and they were professional and kind and told me they would look into it. They asked me if I had any idea who might have had access to my apartment. I gave them a list. The building maintenance worker, my landlord's son who I had given my spare key to once, just once, when I was traveling and asked him to water my plants. I don't know what they found on that camera. The detective who handled the case told me there was footage. He didn't tell me how much footage. He didn't tell me what was on it. He just told me that the investigation was ongoing and that I should consider relocating while they completed their work. I moved out within a week. I left most of my furniture behind because I couldn't look at it. What I think about now, and I think about it more than I'd like to admit, is how long it had been there. The charger didn't look new. The plug had a faint scuff on one corner, the kind that happens when something gets knocked around a little. It hadn't been placed the day I found it. It had been there for a while. I don't know for how many days someone watched me live my life in that apartment and thought nothing of it. I don't know if they watched from somewhere nearby or from across the city on a phone screen. I don't know if they watched alone. What I do know is this. I gave someone my key just once to water my plants, and I will never do that again. The milk was the first sign, and I missed it completely. I live alone. I've lived alone for 4 years in the same apartment on the 5th floor of a building with 1 elevator and 1 stairwell. My routine is almost embarrassingly consistent. I wake up, I make coffee, I leave for work by 8. I come back between 6 and 7. I cook something simple, I watch something on my laptop, I go to sleep. I am one person. I use 1 mug. I have 1 set of habits. So when I opened the refrigerator on a Tuesday morning and noticed that the milk I'd bought on Saturday, a new carton, barely touched, was sitting about 2/3 empty, I didn't panic. I thought I must have been drinking more of it than I remembered. You do that. You pour yourself a glass while you're reading emails, and you don't even register it. I bought a new carton the next day and made a mental note to myself, pay attention. 3 days later, it happened again. Now, a different kind of person might have figured it out right then, but I want you to understand the way your mind protects you. It doesn't just lie, it constructs an entire alternative reality that is slightly more comfortable than the truth, and it does it quickly, quietly, without asking your permission. My brain told me I was stressed and distracted and not sleeping well. It told me I was the problem, and I believed it. I started finding other small things. A dish left on the wrong side of the drying rack, a throw pillow that had been shifted on the couch, not dramatically, just slightly, the way you'd move it to sit comfortably and then put it back, but not exactly right. One morning, I noticed that the bathroom towel I'd hung on the left hook was on the right hook. I have always hung it on the left. By this point, something had quietly taken root in the back of my mind, but it still wasn't a formed thought. It was more like a discomfort, like when a song is playing in another room and you can't quite make out the melody, but it's bothering you anyway. Then I found the wrapper. I was vacuuming behind the couch. I do it once a week, I'm particular about that. And there was a candy bar wrapper pushed back against the baseboard. It was a brand I don't eat. I am mildly allergic to nuts. This bar was full of nuts. I sat on the floor and held that wrapper for a long time. I thought about my building. I thought about my apartment. I thought about the storage closet at the end of the hallway in my unit that I never opened because I filled it with boxes when I moved in and just left them there. I have not opened that closet in over a year. I didn't open it that night. I want to be honest about that. I sat with what I was starting to understand, and I just didn't. I convinced myself one more time that there was an explanation, that a friend had brought that brand of candy bar during a visit and the wrapper had rolled behind the couch, that things get moved when you clean, that I forget things about my own behavior. I called my sister and talked to her for an hour about nothing. I just needed to hear a voice. The next morning, I called a locksmith before I went to work. I said I'd lost a key and needed the lock changed. He came that afternoon. I told myself it was just a precaution. When I got home that evening, the new key in my hand, I stood in my hallway for a moment. Then I walked to the storage closet at the end of the hall and I opened it. The boxes were stacked the same way I'd left them. Everything looked undisturbed. I almost laughed at myself. Then I noticed the corner of a dark gray blanket peeking from behind the back row of boxes. I don't own a gray blanket. I backed out of the apartment and called the police from the stairwell. They found a sleeping area behind the boxes, a folded gray blanket, a small backpack, an empty water bottle, some food wrappers. Whoever had been living there had been careful enough that I missed it for what the police estimated might have been 2 to 3 weeks, possibly longer. The building had a parking garage with a door that didn't always latch properly. They believe that's how he got in. He was never identified. There was no record of him in the building security footage because the camera in the parking garage had been aimed at the wrong angle for months and nobody had noticed. I still don't know if he was there when I was sleeping. I don't know if he sat in my living room while I worked, just on the other side of those boxes in the hallway. I don't know if he watched me through the gap under the closet door. I know that for 2 to 3 weeks, maybe longer, I shared my home with a stranger, and I almost never found out.